I stood up in the middle of sixth period AP English, hands literally shaking, and said the thing every single person in that class had been whispering about since September, and the room went so quiet I could hear the clock ticking on the wall behind me. Let me back up. My name's Jordan, I'm 17, and I've been at Westfield High since freshman year. I'm not the loudest person in any room. I'm not the kid who argues with teachers or starts drama for fun. I'm the kid who sits second row, takes notes in three different colored pens, and cries in the bathroom if I get below a 92. That's just who I am. School is the one thing I feel like I can control, you know? My parents split up sophomore year. My older sister moved out right after, and home has been this weird rotating schedule of which parent's apartment I'm sleeping at on which night. So yeah, school became my safe space. Specifically, English class. I love writing. I love reading. I love pulling apart a book until you find the thing the author buried 6 layers deep. And when I got into Mr. Callahan's AP English class junior year, I genuinely thought it was going to be the highlight of my entire high school experience. Mr. Callahan is one of those teachers everyone talks about. He's youngish, maybe early 30s, wears these vintage band tees under his blazer, quotes David Foster Wallace like it's casual conversation. Half the school thinks he's the coolest teacher alive. The other half thinks he tries too hard. I was firmly in the first camp. At least, I was at the beginning. Then there's Marin Chen. She transferred to Westfield at the start of the school year from some arts academy in Portland. She writes poetry. She has a Substack. She wears these long, flowy skirts and talks about Sylvia Plath like they were roommates. And look, I don't want to be that person. Marin isn't a bad person. I actually think in a different universe we could have been friends. But from literally day one of this semester, something was off about the way Mr. Callahan treated her versus the rest of us. The first week, he read one of her poems out loud to the class without anyone asking. He introduced it by saying, and I quote, "This is what real voice sounds like." Real voice, to a room full of 17-year-olds who had been writing in his class for months. That stung, but I told myself I was overthinking it. Maybe the poem was just that good. Maybe I was being insecure. My friend Dev, who sits behind me, leaned forward and whispered, "That was weird, right?" And I just shrugged because I didn't want to be the jealous girl who couldn't handle someone else getting a compliment. But then it kept happening. Every single week there was a new thing. Marin's essays got read aloud. Marin got recommended for the district writing showcase. Marin got to skip peer review because, and Mr. Callahan said this out loud, she's already operating at a different level. That one made my stomach drop, because I had won the school writing prize the year before. I had a piece published in the county literary magazine as a sophomore. And suddenly, none of that mattered, because Marin had a Substack and a wardrobe that looked like a poetry anthology come to life. The real breaking point started building around mid-October. We had this major assignment, a personal essay worth 20% of our semester grade. Mr. Callahan gave us 3 weeks, and I poured everything into mine. I wrote about the night my mom sat me and my sister down and told us Dad was moving out. I wrote about how I sat in the hallway outside my bedroom door and listened to them fight about who would keep the dog. Stupid detail, right? But it's the detail that wrecked me because it meant everything was being divided, even the things that were supposed to just love you unconditionally. I revised that essay 11 times. I read it out loud to myself until I had it memorized. I turned it in feeling like I'd handed over a piece of my own chest. We got our grades back on a Tuesday. I got an 88, with a note that said, strong emotional content, but the structure feels familiar. Push yourself to take more risks with form. I sat there reading that comment over and over, more risks with form. I wrote the most honest thing I've ever written and the feedback was about structure. Meanwhile, and I know this because Marin told people, she wasn't even secretive about it, she got a 97 on an essay about growing up bilingual. Which, yeah, that's a meaningful topic. I'm not saying it wasn't. But 2 days later, Mr. Callahan asked Marin to stay after class, and my friend Priya overheard him telling her he wanted to submit her essay to some national high school writing competition. He never mentioned my essay at all. Not to me, not to the class. Dev and Priya and I started comparing notes, and it wasn't just me being sensitive. Dev had gotten an 85 on his essay with almost the exact same feedback about taking risks. Priya got a 90 but said Mr. Callahan barely wrote any comments, just a smiley face and nice work. We started looking at participation grades. Marin had spoken up maybe 5 times all semester. I'd been raising my hand every single class, and somehow we had the same participation score. That's when I stopped thinking I was imagining things. Then November came and everything got worse. Mr. Callahan announced that our class would be putting together a literary magazine, a real one, printed and bound, funded by the PTA. Everyone was excited. He said he'd be selecting an editor-in-chief based on demonstrated literary merit and leadership. I wanted that position more than I'd wanted almost anything. I'd been editing the school paper since sophomore year. I had experience. I had the grades. Or at least I used to before the Mystery 88. I even went to Mr. Callahan's office hours and told him directly that I was interested. He smiled, nodded, said, "That's great, Jordan. We'll see how it shakes out." He picked Marin, of course he picked Marin. He announced it in class like it was obvious, like there had never been another option. Marin's editorial sensibility is exactly what this project needs, he said. I sat there with my hands clasped under my desk so hard my knuckles turned white. Dev looked at me. Priya looked at me. Half the class looked at me because everyone knew I'd wanted it. And the worst part? Marin looked at me too. She had this expression like she felt guilty but not guilty enough to say anything. That's the moment I started to get angry. Not jealous. Not sad. Angry because I had done everything right. I had followed every rule, met every expectation, showed up every single day, and it didn't matter because Mr. Callahan had decided on day one that Marin was his star student, and the rest of us were just the audience. The group chat that night was brutal. Not mean, just honest. Dev said what we were all thinking. This dude literally doesn't see anyone else in the room when she's there. Priya said she'd talked to two seniors who had Callahan last year, and apparently he did the same thing then, picked a favorite, poured all his energy into them, and everyone else just existed in the background. That made me feel sick and validated at the same time. It wasn't personal, it was a pattern, but knowing that didn't make it hurt less. My mom called that night, and I could barely talk. She asked what was wrong, and I just said, school stuff, because how do you explain to your parent that you feel invisible in the one place you thought you mattered? I spent the next 2 weeks drafting what I wanted to say. Not a rant, not some dramatic call-out. I wanted to be precise. I wanted to say the thing that was true and let it sit in the room, and I told myself I'd wait for the right moment. The moment came on a Thursday. Mr. Callahan was handing back our latest short fiction assignment. He held up Marin's story and started reading a passage out loud again, and then he said, "This is the standard I want everyone aspiring toward." Marin understands that great writing isn't just about what you say, it's about how you make the reader feel. And something in me just snapped, not in a screaming way, in a quiet, terrifying way. I stood up. My chair scraped the floor. Everyone looked at me. I said, "Mr. Callahan, can I ask you something honestly?" He looked surprised but nodded. I said, "Do you think it's possible that when you only hold up one person's work as the example every single week, it makes the rest of us feel like our writing doesn't matter? Because I've been in this class for 4 months and I've never once heard you talk about anyone else's work the way you talk about Marin's. And some of us are working really, really hard." The silence was unbearable. Marin stared at her desk. Mr. Callahan's face did this thing where you could see him cycling through responses, defensive, confused, and then something that almost looked like guilt. He said, "Jordan, I appreciate all of my students equally. If I highlight certain work, it's because I think it can teach the class something." And I said, "Then why is it always the same person's work that teaches us something? What does that tell us about ours?" He didn't answer. He just nodded slowly and said, "That's fair. Let's move on." That was it. No explosion, no dramatic walkout, just a question that hung in the air like smoke. Here's the part I didn't know. After class, Priya grabbed my arm in the hallway and told me something that made my entire chest cave in. Apparently, Marin had gone to Mr. Callahan during the first week of school, crying, and told him she'd left her old school because she'd been severely bullied there, kids mocking her writing, tearing up her poems, calling her pretentious. She'd transferred to Westfield as basically a last resort. And Mr. Callahan, who probably thought he was helping, had made it his personal mission to build her up. Every public compliment, every reading of her work out loud, every special opportunity, he was trying to undo what those other kids had done to her. He wasn't playing favorites to be cruel. He was overcorrecting out of compassion. And I had just publicly questioned it in front of the entire class. So now I'm sitting here and I genuinely don't know how to feel. I stand by what I said. The way Mr. Callahan handled it was unfair to 23 other students who deserved to feel seen too. You can support one person without making everyone else feel small. But I also can't stop thinking about Marin sitting there while I basically challenged her right to be praised. I didn't know what she'd been through. I didn't ask. I made it about me. And maybe some of it was about me, about my parents and my need for school to be the place where I'm enough. I've thought about apologizing to Marin, not for what I said to Mr. Callahan, but for how it might have landed on her. I haven't done it yet. I don't know if she even wants to hear from me. So tell me honestly, was I right to say something, or did I make it worse for someone who was already hurting? Because I really cannot figure this one out on my own.